This week, the glibc update gets worse. We'll talk about it. Plus, a new launcher is making its way to Linux, and Wayland gets HDR support. All of this and more today. That's right, it's Steam Deck and Linux gaming news time. So remember last week when we talked about the glibc update that was breaking compatibility with Portal 2 and Left 4 Dead 2? Yeah, well, it looks like it wasn't just limited to Portal 2 and Left 4 Dead 2, which I suspected would be the case. So if you Google glibc 2.41 video games, then you come up with a bunch of games that have been broken by this update to glibc, including Celeste, Dead Letter Department, Receiver 2, Stardew Valley's Galaxy API, and even Vintage Story, right? So a bunch of fairly popular games with native Linux titles have been harmed by this update to glibc, version 2.41 here. Some of it can be traced down to fmod here. Fmod is aware of glibc, and the newer versions of the fmod library that ship with standalone Linux clients actually should be immune from this problem, but games that use older versions, 2.01 and older, are actually going to need to update the game code themselves in order to have this issue be fixed for them. And there are other titles, like specifically here, the Galaxy API, I don't believe requires fmod. This is a separate issue. Now, this is one of the reasons that a lot of people have issue with native Linux games, because despite the decree from Linus Torvalds that we don't break user space, it happens all the time, especially with older games with proprietary code, legacy titles, back compat titles. Things break. When I first started this channel over 10 years ago at this point, there were a bunch of games that I reviewed that had native Linux builds, and I go to try most of those games today and they are broken. They don't launch anymore because the Linux ecosystem, the APIs, the ABIs, break all the time. Okay? They break all the time because most open source developers don't consider, and frankly probably shouldn't consider, closed source software. Closed source software, especially when it comes to games, don't get updates that often. They're used to the Windows way of doing things. And until that changes, I think that Proton is the better way to actually support games going forward. Like it or not, Windows is a legacy system that we're all just going to have to deal with. If we want to play these old games that we've had in our libraries for years, then this is the deal with the devil that we have to make. It's one thing if it's Stardew Valley having a broken native Linux client. That will probably get fixed because Stardew Valley is one of the top played games on Steam Deck, and Stardew Valley is still making a bunch of money. But there's no guarantee that it's going to be fixed, and until it gets fixed, the workarounds can lead to dangerous runtime issues. The question is, do they know about this? Do the developers of glibc know about this? If we go over to the glibc issue tracker, we can see that someone has reported here, Toolybird. They've reported that apps like Discord and Steam games and also the Julia language are having issues with this new update. And it's also affecting 32-bit mono applications as well. And you can run this extra command, exe stack c, when you're executing your games. But the problem is that makes the stack executable. Essentially, when things get pushed on the stack, it's usually just data unless the app requests to have an executable stack where it can pop things off and execute it. I'm not like a C programmer, so this is kind of a layman's understanding, but this is my understanding of what's happening. And the fact is, this might be a recipe for trouble. And it looks like glibc is fully aware of this situation, and it's not going to be fixed, as this was an intentional change to enhance the security of applications running on Linux. So yeah, the fact is, I firmly believe that Proton is the best way forward for legacy titles and even modern titles. I mean, I think the people who are really fighting against Proton don't truly understand how it works. I mean, the fact is Proton is an an implementation of Windows abstraction layer. Windows has abstraction layers all over the place. DirectX, their HUD input system, all these things that Wine and Proton are just re-implementing into native Linux calls instead of being Windows calls. So the amount of overhead that Wine adds to your runtime is fairly minimal, and at a certain point, it all gets boiled down into machine code anyway. And with the advent of NT Sync, I think that's going to be one of the final few pieces that need to fall into place to truly exceed the performance of Windows applications on Linux. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I'm very excited about the future here, and I think that this is just one more example of why Proton is a better way forward for video games on Linux. Now, before we move on, I want to mention that I have a podcast. It's called Off the Console, and it's with my friends High Tech Lowlife and James from Games Revealed. We have a ton of fun talking about news, tech, gaming, and everything nerdy. So if you want to head over there and check it out, there's going to be a link on screen up here. It's probably my favorite thing that I've ever done. Just having conversations with the guys about cool, nerdy, techie stuff. I mean, it brings me joy, and living where I do in rural Maine with nobody my age or with my interests around, it's really refreshing to just kind of have that community, and being able to connect with you guys has also been really great. So yeah, go check it out. It's available on YouTube, it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we also have a Fediverse enabled RSS feed, which you can find at podcast.subscribe2.me. So check it out, enjoy it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, next up, let's talk about Playnite. This is an open source video game library management tool, and it creates a, quote, a unified interface for all your games. Now, this is fully open source. I believe it's under the MIT license, and people have been asking for a cross-platform build of Playnite since 2017. Now, it's built on the .NET framework, which is inherently cross-platform since it has Mono on Linux and Mac OS and stuff. So the idea of them porting it didn't seem that crazy. But just this week, I believe he's the lead developer, Joseph Nemec, said, quote, "Once we have polished the Windows version of Avalonia-based Playnite, I'll start working on a Linux version. I don't want to make just a straight port of the Windows version. That wouldn't be good enough. I would really like to have Linux-specific features available on release, like Wine/Proton specific features, Epic and GOG plugins using Legendary and Heroic GOG DL respectively, stuff like that." So to sum this up, Linux version is definitely something I plan to work on in the future. It's just going to happen later than originally planned. Now, you know what? I can respect that. It's pretty neat to see people developing neat applications that love gaming, talking about Linux support. And when the Linux version of Playnite drops, I'm going to be one of the first people to be talking about it on the internet. So make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss that. There's a new development release of Wine version 10.1. It's now available, and there's some pretty neat stuff in here. There's fixes for the root certificate for Battle.net, which should improve Battle.net support. They've also made support for Bluetooth drivers through Wine. So Wine 10.1 should support things like Bluetooth headsets in games and things like that. Not that it doesn't work right now, but it's not the most ideal experience. And now it's time for Deals of the Week, where we talk about the best deals that you're going to find to help you grow your library. I know that you probably have a lot of games in your library, but if you want more, I got you covered. First up, we have the Better with Friends Co-op Adventures bundle here. This includes Risk of Rain Returns, which is an excellent game if you haven't played it. It's awesome. Trine 4, The Nightmare Prince, which is a title that I've been meaning to play for a while because I've enjoyed the Trine series for a long time. Across the Obelisk, which looks pretty neat. Tribes of Midgard, Cat Quest 2, and For the King Deluxe Edition. This is 6 games for $10, which is a pretty sweet deal. And as always with Humble Bundles, a portion of your purchase goes to charity. Then they have another great deal, the Capcom Arcade Classics and Fighter Pack, which is 70 games for 20 bucks. And I'm not going to go through all of these games because there's a lot here, as you can tell. I can't vouch for all of these games working with Proton, but I'm assuming many of them will. And I mean, check it out, like many of these have playable on deck marked here. But yeah, and this has 30 games here in the Arcade Stadium collection and 30 more games. Yeah, 20 bucks for 70 games. I can't tell you how excited that makes me. I love collecting games. Finally, there's the Steam Couch Co-op Fest, and my game, Dudelings Arcade Sportsball, is available for 40% off. It's available 40% off, not just on Steam, but also on Humble, and it's also available here on Itch. The Itch build actually comes DRM free, and it has an Android build. And Heavy Element Games actually has a Discord channel where user Mucow1452 used the Android build of the game to port it to ARM. So if you want to play this game on like the Retroid Pocket 5 or something, but you have a Linux distro on here, you can totally do that if you buy the Itch version. I'm very excited about this because people tell me that they're having fun with this game, and the Itch version also comes with the original soundtrack made by my favorite band on the internet, the Brothers Nylon. So if you want to check that out, it's a great deal right now. And if you pick up any of these other bundles here, these are affiliate links down in the description and in the pinned comment. If you use my links, it helps support this show at no additional cost to you. So thank you. Next up, Gaming on Linux was reporting that Wayland Color Management and HDR protocols are now finally merged into Wayland, which is very exciting because I've heard a lot of people, I've seen a lot of comments saying that HDR support is piss poor on Linux, and it's one of the reasons they don't want to use it. Now, we've had some kind of half measures and stop gaps for HDR support on Linux for a while, for like maybe a year and a half, something like that. But that's only through GameScope right now, as far as I understand it. And so being able to play games like, you know, Tetris Effect or Doom Eternal or whatever on an HDR display really only works through GameScope when you're running it on specific hardware under specific circumstances. Now, this update to Wayland should make things a whole lot better. Now, this merge request was issued 5 years ago, so like 2020, and it's just been taking a while to make sure that they hit all of their goals here. Their stated goals are to maintain the color support that's already available while upgrading things to support HDR when necessary. For example, to support professional color managed applications, to support displaying TV broadcasts or other high quality video content, to support a wide variety of monitors and application content, including wide gamut and or HDR. And they also want to bring basic color management to applications that are not color aware at all, and bring adequate color management to Wayland applications that are color aware but not color managed. I'm going to be honest with you, while being a designer, I'm not fully educated on what this stuff means, but I do know what looks good, and having an HDR monitor like I do here or out in my living room and not being able to take full advantage of that kind of annoys me. And frankly, it is surprising to me that Linux is lagging behind in the HDR space, because usually Linux is at the forefront of supporting technology, I have found anyway. For example, I can adjust the color, the backlights of my monitors by using the GNOME panel here, which I am really excited about. I don't know if you can tell, you might have been able to tell there, but it takes a second for the bus to update, but fully update, thank you. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that Linux supports. I've never seen support for that on Windows, and I've been running Windows, dual booting Windows and Linux on this machine for ages at this point, and I didn't have to do anything except on GNOME I had to download an extension, but on KDE it just worked. There was no extension needed. Anyway, the reason I went off on that rant is because Linux usually supports new technology like that really quickly, and HDR I guess is just more complex than a simple upgrade for like an I2C bus or something like that. But yeah, anyway, next up there's SteamOS version 3.6.21. there's a stable release of SteamOS now, and this has just a few fixes. But one of the fixes that is most intriguing is the fact that they have fixed a rendering issue with characters' eyes in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Now, I haven't personally played Indiana Jones yet. I've heard a lot of people, including James, from the podcast that I host with him, I've heard him talk about this game a lot. And from my understanding, Indiana Jones requires ray tracing in order to actually use or play the game. So the fact that SteamOS here is including fixes specifically for Indiana Jones is pretty interesting and exciting to me. I've played Doom Eternal with ray tracing enabled, and it really doesn't diminish the frame rate too much. So I'm pretty interested to see what Indiana Jones performs like on the Steam Deck. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Have you tried playing Indiana Jones on your Steam Deck? Let me know down in the comments. They've also added support for the 8BitDo Ultimate 2C controller, which I'm pretty excited about. I've got one of these and I'm going to review it pretty soon. Let me know if you guys want to see that. And they've also fixed some kernel vulnerabilities. They fixed MPG 123 vulnerability and libarchive vulnerabilities. So this is a smaller release for SteamOS, but it is still an important one. And because it fixes vulnerabilities, I'd recommend that you upgrade your Steam Deck to the new version. With that said, I think that's going to do it for this video. I want to hear your guys' take on anything we talked about today, but that's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.